Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Thanks for tuning in. We had a good Easter. It was nice. It was very sunny, very good weather outside. Love that. I've had some Easters where it just feels so cold, and I feel bad for the girls because you guys are all in these like really nice dresses, but then the wind, or even the worst is when it rains.
Yeah, I was gonna say the last however long I can remember, I feel like it's always gross and gloomy and rainy on Easter because I feel like right before Jesus rises from the grave, maybe that's kind of that's how I envision it feeling.
Yeah.
That's probably not how it happened, but just the world is in heaven is mourning and just sad, and then he rises from the dead.
Yeah.
And then it's sunny. But this year we get a sunny Easter, which I'm happy about.
It was good. But I know, this temporary break, some people will have off work for this past weekend. And some people will just sort of have that as a time where things are starting to slow down for a minute, but then it speeds back up. Most of us go into the next couple of months being very overwhelmed by the things that we're going through. And we wanted to just take some time to focus in on what that really means and how do we handle it. Because so many of us have to deal with feelings of overwhelming stress and tasks that have to be done. And it starts to bottle up, and it turns into sort of the perfect scenario for you to choose things other than God, because you have all this built up tension. And while that's something that God wants you to bring to him, it's so easy for Satan to tempt us to go the other way.
Yeah, that's very true. When there's so much going on, you almost run to your comfort things instead of running to God, which is the ultimate comforter. But kind of like comfort food, whenever I'm sad about the number on the scale or something, I go and eat my comfort food instead of finding the real solution, that's going to sustain me longer and bring me more joy. And it's disciplined and it's harder at the time, and you don't want to do it. It doesn't feel good, but ultimately that's going to be the thing that's best for you if that's your issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I personally struggle a lot with having a lot of little things sometimes build up, and I feel very overwhelmed. One of the times that I tend to feel overwhelmed, and it's kind of silly, is on weekends where we have lots of errands to do. And Victoria can attest, I get very irritable when we're shopping or we have a list of places to go.
He does not like running errands.
I don't.
But it's funny because I tell him in the future, I will be the errand runner when I'm at home with the kids. Most likely I will go ahead and knock that out while he's at work so that he doesn't have to do it, because I know it just he really doesn't like it, and I don't love it either. Who likes to go grocery shopping or go return something to the mall? It's not glamorous, it's not very fun, but someone's got to do it, so I'll take one for the team.
Thank you for doing that.
Only a little bit longer.
Yeah, well, we'll see. If you're married, you get that question a lot. But
that's true.
For me personally, when we're doing shopping and we have a long list of things to do, I start to feel the walls closing in on me a little bit. And I start to feel like there's just so much to do and not enough time. And it's all falling on us, or we have to, be the only people that deal with it. And then, of course, when stuff happens at work or when it was happening at school, when I was in school, that would all start to feel like, okay, it's all heaped on me. And it's usually not something big for me. It's usually a lot of small things that just collect, and they produce this feeling of being overwhelmed by our environment. And that is usually when I get very irritable, where I'm not the person that Jesus wants me to be. And I think that's something that I want to eliminate from my life as much as possible, because it's those moments where I am not being a good ambassador for the kingdom, and they shouldn't happen. I have everything I need to deal with that, but sometimes I don't know how. And that kind of prompted us to talk about this, is that we a lot of times have all these emotions that come in with being overwhelmed by all the things we have to do and what's expected of us. And usually we don't really know how to deal with that. It's just all of these mixed emotions, and we don't have a way to navigate through that. And so we wanted to sort of look and see, what does Scripture say? What do we believe that God is saying is the best approach to navigating times of feeling overwhelmed? And then ultimately, like, how do we practically get through those seasons? Because we have to get through them. You can't avoid them.
If you're a toddler, then you just explode and have a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
But as an adult, that's not really as acceptable. And we don't want to be turning to anger, to deal with things. But I just think that's funny. You're like, I don't know what to do. Like, all these things are building up. And I just think of a toddler just like exploding everywhere.
Well, especially for a guy that doesn't cry. Like,
How do you not cry?
Well,
you never cry?
Not that I never cry, but typically
I don't know how
girls
men, don't cry.
Typically women
often.
That I know, when that stress comes on to them, it's typically like there's an outlet of crying that can kind of like let all the emotion out, and then you can deal with it. For men, it doesn't really work like that. So sometimes, and we're not in tune enough with our emotions, or at least I'm not. I don't want to speak for men. I hate when that happens. On like TV shows and stuff, where men are always like putting other men down about how you're super stupid and out of tune and you don't listen. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. I respect men out there, but I'll say for myself, I'm not in tune with my own emotions as well as she is. And so for me, those feelings of being overwhelmed kind of turn into like being very angry and irritable. Angry.
Yeah, you're very irritable, and like I can feel the bitterness like in the way that you're acting or your tone or whatever, and I'll start to realize this isn't Nicholas. Like, what? And I'll take a step back and be like, are you okay?
Sometimes it reminds me of Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
Where he's like,
he'll just like be normal, then just snap, and it's kind of creepy.
Yeah, it is kind of weird.
I don't
have like a conversation with himself. Yeah. you're not that bad.
I'm not. Yeah, we'll get away from the Gollum references. But that's a real problem where you have all these emotions and you don't know what to do with them. Yeah. And for me, it also happens when there's just it's a lot of little things, because normally my personality, if I'm faced with something that's big, I tend to calibrate myself and give that to God, because maybe I'm the type of person that says, this is too big for me, I'll give it to God. But when it's a lot of little things, a lot of times I don't think about giving that to God. Wow,
that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. Like, whenever there's something big in my life, like which college to choose, or what city to move to after college, which job to apply to after college, which person to date, should I marry someone or not? Like, these really, really big questions, and just like scenarios that we're all faced with. The big stuff, that is easier for me. I don't know about y'all, but it sounds like you and I are on the same page. It's easier for us to give that over to God, because like, oh, that's a big thing. Like, that's going to need to be God handling that. I can't do it. That's in one of our most recent episodes. That's one of the things that I said about finding you. Like, I can't do it apart from God. Like, it's going to have to be the Lord bringing my spouse, because I can't do it. So it's easier. Nothing's easy about giving up control and trusting, at least for people like me. But it's easier to hand over these big things because we feel so small against them. But all of the little everyday nuances and things that arise, they build up, and we think like we can handle this and we can handle that, until all of a sudden it's boiled over. Yeah. And you're at a loss, and you're at a place where you're like exhausted, you're burnt out, you're confused, you're like, why can I not handle this? These are things that I can manage. And that's where we're not trusting the Lord, clearly. And that's not a good way to handle being overwhelmed with all these things. Yeah,
that's a really good point. Jumping into scripture in Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 5 through 8. is a really good illustration, I think, of what Victoria is talking about, in that you are trusting yourself and you just kind of burn out. So it says, "Thus says the Lord, cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord. He is like a shrub in the desert and shall not see any good come. He shall dwell in the parched places of the wilderness, in an uninhabited salt land." But contrasting that, it says, "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is in the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and it is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit." I love this contrasting set of, in this case, plants, because it does a good job illustrating, number one, the fact that one source is sustainable and one is not, but then also it's always a slow disintegration or a slow resistance against whatever's coming against it. If you are, if you're a plant in the desert and you're slowly dying and drying up, it usually doesn't happen like that. It's usually over time. And when I historically have trusted in my own abilities and flesh, it's very rare that it happens where I fail instantly. It's usually as these small things build up that I refuse to give to God and struggle with, that's where I'm just slowly drying up. And at the end, I feel burnt out. I feel like I can't do it. And I get to a place where I am, like it says, dwelling in the parched places of the wilderness, in an uninhabited salt land. Like there's no one even around because I've trusted myself so much. But then you have the man who trusts in the Lord, whose full trust is in him. He's planted by streams of water that are always flowing, and that you're continuing to get your strength. And what's cool is, in this example, it says, this man does not fear when the heat comes, for its leaves, the tree, remain green. The heat will come. We will always have stress and things that will test us and it will bring the heat. But you don't feel that because you're planted with the source, and the source is sustaining you. And even though you might be in the same location as someone who's slowly drying up, you're not trusting yourself, because apart from that stream, that tree is nothing. That stream is the only thing keeping it stable. And so by aligning our lives in a way that lets us give the small things to God and says, you are far greater than I am, and I'm going to trust you with this thing that I don't think is a big deal, but it can be a big deal because I still can't handle it, I still can't handle having to sort through these 3 projects that got put on my desk, and now I have to figure out, how do I do all of them? I still have to do it. It's still my responsibility, but God's going to have to help me strategize my schedule. He's going to have to give me the ability to work through it. I can't just depend on myself. And it's a lot of those little decisions where you're just choosing to be, again, planted by the stream. You're choosing to stay planted by the stream. That's how you're able to be sustained in those periods of being overwhelmed. But it's harder than it looks. And there's a lot of decisions that go into like choosing to give those things to him.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's interesting when you were reading those verses, relying on man. I can't remember how they word it, but it's funny because I think I know that I am incapable of some things, but I look to people that are so much wiser than me, or that have more years of experience, or they would know how to handle this situation better than I would. So it's not necessarily that I'm relying on my own strength and wisdom to navigate a situation, but I kind of like depend on other people around me. But both are man and both are wrong and both are not God. So either way you look at it. But I just remember, like, when faced with big things, before Nicholas, I would call my dad and be like, what do I do about this? What should I do? where should I go? How should I handle this? And I would just seek out his advice. And I was very dependent on that. And then when Nicholas and I got married, anytime something would arise at work or I'd feel very overwhelmed and all these things coming against me and building up and making me feel so overwhelmed and just like I cannot handle another day, I would go to Nicholas instead of going to God. And we've had many conversations conversations about this, because that's something that I see in myself, in this like very evident sin that I see, where I'm going to man, I'm going to someone that I'm placing before God before I go to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an idol.
Yeah.
So whether you're leaning on your own understanding or the wisdom of an experience of someone else, either or both are still not the right answer, and we're still not going to the right source of truth and wisdom and knowledge, and the only one who is truly in control, and who has a perfect plan for your life and the right timing for everything, and who wants to help you with the small things of your day and the things that may seem teeny but build up and build up. He wants to help you with those things and carry that load for you, if we would just lay our burdens down at his feet and say, I cannot do this. No matter if it's a few big rocks in your backpack or 1,000 little pebbles, that's still going to feel really heavy. And we're not meant to carry it on our own. And I think that's so hard for us to understand, because we feel like we're so capable of all these things and all these gadgets that we have to help us get through, like planning things out, and just, we have enough money to do XYZ. There's just all these things that we think we're capable of, we can handle anything, like whatever's thrown at us, we can figure it out. But that's not the right way to frame it. Like, as if you're not going to God to help you handle feeling overwhelmed and all these daily anxieties, then you're ultimately still going to feel the weight of that, like every single day.
Yeah, that's a good point, that you have, it doesn't matter what size the rocks are, if they weigh the same. It's like, what's heavier, a ton of feathers or a ton of bricks? They both weigh a ton. So it doesn't matter
it's like
what it is. Yeah, I know. They got me with that in second grade. Never forgot it. So
you're like, never again.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think it is harder in many cases to let God have the little things.
Right.
Sometimes I feel responsible for handling those. Like, God can't handle my stuff and other people's if it's too small. I don't want to burden God. And the awesome reality is that we cannot burden God. There is nothing we can do that's too much for God to handle. The experiences that we have in going to a human with questions or problems that we need help with, and them saying, I just can't, I've got too much going on, that doesn't happen to God. He never has too much going on to help us.
That's true.
And in many cases, sometimes the small things, if we don't give those to God and they work out, because sometimes they do, right? Sometimes the little things you're able to do and you just keep going. You don't think about it. But you don't chalk that up to a win for God. You don't glorify him with that victory. And that's selfishness.
That's a really good point, because we think we did it in our own abilities.
Right. So you have all the gadgets, like you're saying. If you have money, you're able to pay someone to fix the leak in your roof. Right. That's great. And it may not be as impactful to you as if you didn't have any money and God somehow provided someone to fix the roof. But he still gave you that money, and he still is providing for you, and he's still putting you in a position to where, yes, you get to call someone to help, and they were able to do the job well. And you can give him the glory for the small things. And so I think for me in my life, it's going to have to be a 2-part process. I have to give God the small things so that he can help me, and then glorify God with the small victories, because he is the one that did it. and I have to let him be the owner of the problem as well as the solution.
That's a really good point. There's this one song that I've been listening to. Let me see if I can find it. I really like it. I found it off of somebody else's playlist, so I can't take the credit for finding it, but it's so good. And it's basically saying, like, in every situation, everything I face in this life, may you get the glory. It's not about me. It's not of my own doing. In the good things and in the bad things, may we give God the glory no matter how it turns out, because he is so good and he's already done far more than we could ever deserve or imagine through his son Jesus. And we're so undeserving. But so no matter what we're facing, like, he should still get the glory. And I'm so encouraged by just the book of Job in general. Like, if you have not read it, go read it. But it's amazing to see his faith throughout, and just all of the opposition that he faces time and time again, and how much, even when his friends and his wife are telling him, just curse the Lord and move on, or whatever they say. I can't remember exactly. But basically, like, forget God, like he's abandoned you. I'm playing a song. He never gives up on the goodness of our God, and still holds tight to the truth that remained then and still remains now. But anyways, this song, so that song is very encouraging to me, but it is called...
I might have passed it up here.
Did I? Oh, yeah. It's called You Get the Glory by Jonathan Traylor. Like Taylor, but with an R in there too. So if you want to go check it out, I'll put it on our stories or something. But I could listen to that song on repeat because the lyrics are just so perfect. But also, going back to what we were talking about, well, what I was talking about with leaning on man, and from that scripture you said, like, dry shrub, if they're going like leaning on their own understanding, but then they're like a plant or a tree plant,
like a tree planted by water.
Oh, tree planted by the water. I don't think that is to negate completely going to, like, if you have a mentor or just someone in your life who is wiser and who is, like, solid on the word. Don't go to just any willy-nilly person. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that in saying that, the first person that you should go to should be the Lord. And B, we shouldn't rely so heavily on what they think of the situation, because they are not us, and the Holy Spirit could be leading us a different way than the advice that someone may be giving you. So just being very prayerful, going to God first, and understanding that you can get advice from other people or ask for help. Definitely ask for help if you need it. But ultimately, your hope and your trust and the way that you feel less overwhelmed is not going to come from someone else. It's not going to come from anything that they say or do for you, because they don't have that kind of power.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it. Like, it has to come from the Lord, or else you're still going to have that backpack full of rocks on your back.
Yeah. So he uses people to give us that advice. But like you're saying, you have to go to him first. And I think the right way to approach is to pray about it, to spend time in prayer over it, and then call a mentor or visit with a mentor and ask him or her those things. And perhaps God will use that person to deliver the answer that you've been praying for.
Right.
But it should never be in isolation, because you don't want to trust man. We're imperfect. Your mentors are imperfect. Every man except for Jesus that has ever lived is imperfect. And so that's the only source. That's the only stream that we can count on. But it continues to be something that you will have to consciously do every time. Like it always continues.
Mm-hmm.
It's never a one time, okay, I'll just give everything to God. Usually doesn't work like that. Every day you have to, as the Bible says, take up your cross, and you have to die to your fleshly desires. And those desires are to hold on to things that we shouldn't hold on to, and to pretend that you can do it on your own power. There's nothing we could do to get to God. There's nothing we could do to be fully successful in this world, because this world is only temporary. And so those who are successful in the world sense are only temporarily successful. So there's a lot of times where we believe that we are doing all the right things, and we put in all the technology, and we have all the great systems that'll handle everything. I promise you, those will fail. Those will always break down. But God is forever, and that's why we're not anxious about the year of drought, and we will not cease to bear fruit, because we continue to be plugged into the source.
That's really good.
Okay, so let's talk quickly about what are the practical things. We already talked about a couple, but legitimate, like when we are starting to feel those feelings of being overwhelmed, what do we do to get out of that? There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of confusion many times. You're not necessarily thinking clearly in those times. So is there anything that has helped you?
I mean, obviously it's going to look different for everybody, but I think you're exactly right. There is a lot of emotion around feeling overwhelmed, and you just, however that looks for you, you in some way are breaking down, and you're at your wit's end, and you're just so broken down, I guess. So I think taking a moment or two or three to just kind of step back from the situation, pull yourself out of it, and have some time to process through everything. That would be a first step, at least that I try to do.
So not continuing to just try to fight through it.
Right. I think you need a break, and that's why I'm so thankful for the weekends, because I feel like it is an actual break where you have to stop going 1,000 miles an hour, unless you fill your weekend with a lot of things too, then it's not helpful. But that's, I think, why the Sabbath was in place, why the Lord tells us to keep it holy and to still observe it, because we're not meant to go 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. There we go. Just like consumed by life's things that go on. Like, we're not meant to, we can't handle it. So I think taking some time to just process and take a breather and pull away from the situation for a while is very healthy and good. And then whatever way that you connect with the Lord most peacefully, I would recommend doing that. So if that's being in the Word, or for me, it's worship music. So I just try to block out everything around me and just focus on the music. And when I'm at a loss for words, the lyrics really help me, like claim and proclaim claim and proclaim God's words and his faithfulness over my life. And it helps me to say those things that we all know the Lord is and is capable of, but in those moments of feeling overwhelmed, we just don't feel like he can handle this, or he has time for this, like you were saying. So that always helps me get me back grounded in the Word and the truth of the Word and what it says and who God is. So it could be any one of those things: prayer, taking a drive, talking to God out loud, journaling.
Yeah. Most of the time
things.
It involves not being with other people.
That's a really good point. It does usually mean you're like removing yourself from the noise, even from other people, which can be good, like we talked about. Getting good, solid, godly advice from someone is completely fine, but at the end of the day, it's you and God, and you've got to learn to give this trust over to him. And that's ultimately why we're going through all of these things, and why we do have issues and struggle with trust and hoping in the Lord and giving up control and handing him over the things in our lives that we clench so tightly to. But that's ultimately, these are tests that are uncomfortable, not fun. We don't want to go through them, but they're ultimately bringing us closer to the Lord if done the way that they're supposed to. Like, no matter how long it takes you, when you get to that point, you usually, where you throw up your hands and you're like, okay, Lord, like this, I've got to just give this to you. However long that takes you to get to that point, when you get there, that's bringing you closer to the Lord. And that's why we go through these trials, so that we can remind ourselves to keep going to him.
Yeah. I think that's a really wise thing to dwell on, is that you go through these things so that you can get to your end to realize you need God. I have this like weird idea that if I just am more conscious of that and try to give more to God and routinely say, I can't do it and you're going to have to help and trust him, that I'm not going to have as many heavy things that I'm going to have to go through. As if like God's just using my life, he's just going to rain destruction until I turn back to him. Sometimes he sort of lets things happen.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is a really good approach in our lives, and it will lead to a lot less anxiety and stress if we continue to remember that we cannot. There's that classic overused little saying that's on a million shirts and mugs, let go and let God. If you need to put that
That's
somewhere
great.
to remind you to do this, that's great, because it is kind of true. Like, you have to let go and let God work. And sometimes that is about how, you broke a dish in the morning and you're just really frustrated and you have 10 other things to do, and now you have one less mug.
And one more thing to do, clean up the mess.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes, it's when it rains, it pours, and you start to feel all the emotion. And that's where having some history with all the things that God has done for you, removing yourself, zooming out from the situation and remembering, hey, this doesn't matter. These are small things and I need God to help me with them. But at the end of the day, this is just a very small piece of my life. Yeah. And so zooming out of the situation and remembering where you are in the timeline of eternity, which isn't really a timeline, it's an arrow that goes on forever. That helps to just relax yourself, get rid of the emotion. And then you can go to God in prayer, and you can say all that you need to say to get him to really understand how you're feeling, and don't hold back. If you're having those strong feelings, let him know, because many times that is a sign to him that you are trusting him with this, that you're no longer retaining it in your body, but you're expressing it and you're saying, this is how I'm feeling. I need your help because I can't keep it all in. And he wants that. He wants you to be open with him. He wants you to be able to express how much less you are than him, because that gives him the ability to work in your life. You have to, I think last week or a couple weeks ago, our podcast, just saying you have to like give him the space to work. You can't give him something and then take it back as soon as he starts to work.
Right.
So part of that is just the continual admission, I can't do this. And these are really small things. And my instinct is to trust myself, but I have to trust you because I can't. I just can't do it. I literally can't.
I just can't even. I think in a society with anxiety being so rampant within our people, me included, I think that's why I didn't frame that well. Let me start over. I think the reason why our society is filled with so much anxiety and anxious people, and it's only getting worse seemingly, is because of this issue. You know, we don't, like, as someone who struggles with severe anxiety, whenever I get very overwhelmed and I do go to Nicholas, hopefully after I've gone to God, he usually, I can't remember how you frame it, but it's basically like the reason why you're having anxiety is because you're not giving up the control to God with whatever it is. And because I'm kind of a control freak, not entirely, but I've got some tendencies. I'm not that bad, but you know, I'm very like particular in the things that like need to happen and the way that I like things done and my routine and things of that nature. So for me, like I was saying, the big things are easy for me to give to God because I feel like I can't handle them. But all of the little things throughout my day that just build up and I feel so overwhelmed, like I can't do it all, but I'm not asking God for help and I'm not going to him for peace and for provision and to show me which way to go or how to handle these things or whatever it is, it's only making my anxiety worse. And so how do you frame it? It's like anxiety is the absence of, how do you say that? Remember
trust?
when you say that to me? No.
I don't know.
No. It's like you're saying like anxiety is like the byproduct of not.
Well, just not trusting that God is in control.
Well, you said it really great one time, but we can't think of
just
it.
One time.
It was one time recently, and I was like,
it's in my greatest hits album. I'm sure we could find it.
Nice. But the way that, however you said it, just stuck with me so much because truly that's where anxiety stems from. Is we are trying to take the control ourselves and we don't trust that no matter how this plays out, the Lord is ultimately in control and he will let whatever happen if that's in his plan. So, and I do grasp too tightly to the little things, not the big things, but the little things. And I choke them to death until I'm like just this big ball of anxiety and I just need to like unclench my fists and like relax and take a step back and breathe and realize God is in control and I'm not, and there's a reason for that because clearly I can't handle it.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I will find myself, I tend to hold a lot of stress in my like shoulders and neck, so I'll find myself kind of balled up and holding and clenching, and I'll release it and I'll just think, why did I feel like I had to do that? Mm-hmm. And many times that's the way these feelings of stress and anxiety and being overwhelmed is. Like, why did I have to take on all of this emotion and stress when I didn't have to? Yeah. There's no reason that I have to take over these because God's in control. So I think I've used this before on the podcast, but it's like being a passenger on a commercial flight and spending the entire time being anxious about all the flight conditions and how the pilot's going to take off and land the plane and just worrying about all of these things that you're not in control of and someone else that's much more qualified than you is control of. So you're trying to take control of something that you never are going to have control of anyway, and you're just taking on unnecessary stress.
You're making me anxious about flying now. We're going out of town soon. Now I'm like, oh gosh.
The point of that was to say they are in control.
No, I know. Okay. I know. I think it's a great analogy, but you're confirming to me like why people are nervous about flying. Like all of those reasons, I'm like, oh wow, I've never thought about that. That's why a lot of people are probably scared of flying. Because I mean, you really are giving up control to a total stranger. But I mean, we do that with really any job. Like your kids get on the school bus, you don't know the bus driver, you know. But that's where our firm foundation can't be in the bus driver and the pilot, in what we can see or someone's reputation we know is solid. No, it has to be on God because he's the only one that has that control and that knows how it's going to end before you get off the plane, you know?
That's right. He is the only one. Well, we hope this was a timely message for people. This is a good one to share if you know someone that's getting overwhelmed. But don't send too many things to them because they might be overwhelmed. So just one at a time.
I think this is a very timely message just because for me too, but there's a lot going on in the world right now. There is always a lot going on, and it's easy to, with 24/7 news and like on every platform you ever get on online, there's like all these news stories that pop up and they're like constantly wanting to feed you all the crazy things that are going on, and it's too much. So I think trying to be less overwhelmed and find our peace in God and breathe and give up that control and realize he's got it all anyways. He's got the whole world in his hands, right?
That's right.
I think now is a good time to start learning how to release that tension and that control.
Yes, it is. I did some yoga this morning.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, wow.
You didn't even know.
I was probably still
releasing
asleep.
the tension. It's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that is it for this episode. Please join us next time. We're going to be talking a little bit about being joyful in a season of engagement and what that looks like. A lot of peeps out there are engaged and starting to get a little old. So we want to talk about that because it is not talked about enough.
They're not getting old. Being in that season, like in between season, is getting old.
Right. Although you're getting old every second. So technically you're getting older.
So technically it's both.
But yes, the season is getting quite old, as it was for us. So last note, we just hit a year of podcasting. We looked back, we saw the end of March 2020 was our first episode. So thank you.
March 30th.
Thank you for the people that have listened, whether you joined us for the first episode or you've joined us for this episode for the first time. Welcome. We're glad to have you. We really appreciate your support. And we are so thankful to be able to do this and talk about Jesus in this way, in such a public way. We love being able to express our faith and talk through things that we didn't feel like were as talked about. And so we're really, really thankful for that opportunity. And hopefully we will have another great year of podcasting.
Let's do it. Keep living life in the right lane, guys.